Hello and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News Channel. Today we're going to talk about why a good news like Moneygram, and I already addressed SBI, but why on a bigger level news doesn't move the price of XRP anymore, and why Hopium and all these crappy connected dots rumors are actually really bad for the price of XRP overall. Now, a little bit of hype in Hopium might be good, keeps people excited, but there is an insane amount of hype in Hopium. Like basically the entire community is basically held up by hype and Hopium when it comes to XRP. And that's true for some of the other coins, but not nearly as true for XRP. There are Bitcoin maximalists, and there are crazy people like John McAfee, who thinks it's going to be $1 million by next year. He also wants people to join his clone army, which, you know, he's a complete joker and no one really cares. No one really pays attention to what he says. I think that's insane as well. So there are definitely maximalists of other coins, but there's definitely more maximalists, more connect the dots theories for XRP than any other coin. And that actually, I think, hurts the price more than anything else. You have to really think about how a lot of the investors think, and this actually does tie back to Wall Street and stocks as well, because it's okay to have a little bit of Hopium as long as it's not like super ridiculous. But if you keep putting expectations, generating Hopium and keep putting expectations, making the coin sound way better than it can actually achieve in X amount of time, then you're really hurting the coin as well, because you're setting unreasonable expectations that can really never be achieved. And you're convincing people that, hey, this stuff is true. Obviously, it has like a 0%. A lot of this stuff has a 0% chance of actually coming true, and people are banking on it coming true. And when it doesn't actually come anywhere close to what you're banking on, they get disappointed and they dump the coin and the price goes back down. See, people thought, I guess the people who actually perpetrated this whole idiotic 589 end of year thing last year thought this would actually be good for the coin and pump it up. Otherwise, they were just trying to get it to temporarily pump so they can dump on everyone else. And if that's the case, then they're just dirty bastards. That's all I have to say about that. But if they actually thought that this would be good for the coin, they are completely mistakenly wrong. Sure, you can temporarily float it up while everything else is dipping, but what happens when that rumor is not achieved? Realize that rumor has 0% chance of being true. So when it wasn't achieved at the end of the year last year, you can see a clear dump off of XRP compared to other coins, especially Bitcoin. And that's why it's been the worst performing coin this year, because it had failed expectations. It was supposed to be 589 in the year, and I can tell by a lot of the comments I could tell by a lot of the comments in my videos that a lot of people actually thought that had a decent chance of happening. Same thing with the $50 in one night theory, and all those like Twitter expert theories, and a lot of the other stuff that's actually been coming up on XRP Maximalist videos. Of course, almost about zero of them came true. Moneygram was the only one that actually had that partnership going, but none of the other theories really ever came true. And therefore, because after disappointment after disappointment, generally XRP price has come down. And the reason why real good news doesn't really affect XRP price is because the fake Hopium news is much better than the actual real news that comes out. So you're setting the expectation at the fake Hopium news level, and then you have the real good news level, which is way below it. So then even when the real news comes out, it falls way below expectations. So no one's willing to speculate on it. I believe if it wasn't for all the Hopium and all the connected dots theories, and you just had news come out without all these crappy theories stating that XRP is going to take over the world or whatever, the XRP price would actually be faring a lot better. Now it probably would have dropped like every other coin at the end of last year, but it would have also risen with the market, possibly even outperformed the market during this rise. So overall, you're actually hurting it. Think about what happens to the stock market, to a certain stock, when the stock doesn't meet expectations, whether in earnings or dividends or whatever. At Wall Street stocks, there's just generally two levels of expectations. There's what officially the targets are for earnings, and then there's like the street expectation for earnings. The street expectation for earnings is actually more important. It's what I guess investors really expect, and whenever the street expectations are not hit, then the stock tends to go down, even if the street expectations are way above the actual stated expectations by the company. Same thing, even if the actual expectations by the companies aren't hit, but the street expectations were actually much lower. If it surpasses the street expectations but doesn't hit the actual expectations from the company, the stock tends to do okay or even go up, because that's the investor mentality. You either hit the expectation or you don't. The problem with 589 and a lot of those other expectations is you have the street expectations set way up here, and then XRP like actually hit some decent expectations, but it's down here. So regardless if the news is good or not, it doesn't measure up with the expectations. And when you don't measure up with the expectations, people are going to dump and the price is going to drop. Sure, some of the investors can say, oh, it's a long-term investment, blah blah blah. But you have all these videos and tweets saying that, oh wow, Swift is going to use it right now, or X big bank is going to use XRP for everything, or this MoneyGram partnership or SBI is going to blink of an eye or whatever. Now, Cattell actually never said blink of an eye $10, but a lot of people interpret it that way. Or Bearable Guy, which is a completely ridiculous thing, has this riddle that says it's going to go to the moon in May or September or whatever. And then it never does that, because obviously all that stuff is like complete bullcrap. Like Hopium, when it refers to XRP right now, is basically a euphemism for exaggerated lies at this point. Real news is real news, but the level of Hopium or exaggerated lies is so much higher than real news, and people like to believe that they're going to be rich regardless of how much lying that actually is. People like to believe that stuff, so they actually believe in it, they expect it to happen, and when it doesn't happen, they're disappointed, and the market dumps. So you're basically, with this Hopium, setting expectations far too high. And when you don't reach those unrealistic expectations, people tend to dump down. And it's really hard to actually change that right now, because people have gotten used to so much expanded expectations for this one crypto. And even though it's never really achieved any of those the unrealistic expectations, people expect them because video after video after video keeps on re-emphasizing that point. Now, you can say people would want to do their own independent research, but when you Google stuff, guess what you get? You get a bunch of Hopium theories and videos. And when they see that as research, they actually believe it to be true. Obviously, for those of us who've been in a long time, we know that's not true. We know that like 99% of that's just like exaggerated bullcrap. But the new investor is not going to do that. So they get sucked in. And then when that date comes and it's still, 31 cents when they expect it to be $50, obviously they're going to be disappointed and be like, hey, well, you know what? This was a load of crap. So they're going to sell and dump. And that's why XRP doesn't react to good news, because the actual real news and the effect of it is never as much as the Hopium that you've perpetrated. And you can tell a lot of the XRP army has started turning on some of their leaders. Once their leaders, start investing in another coin, or once their leaders try to phase out and say like, hey, tamper and lower your expectations, they don't accept that. But you know what? It's the leader's own fault for the army turning on them, because they created the army that way. They were the ones that got people all amped and hyped up, and as a result, they made their own bed. Now they have to sleep in it, unfortunately. So really, all this hype and expectation is extremely damaging for the coin, because remember, when you're buying into the hype and expectations, you're not actually buying into Ripple, the company, and what they said. You're buying into what some random YouTube or Twitter guy said online for really unrealistic expectations. Ripple has never stated once that they're actually working with Swift, whether through R3 or through Temenos or anything. Ripple has really never stated that X large bank is going to use XRP for all their transactions. The only statement Brad Garlinghouse did make, and looks like it's going to fail as well, is that dozens of large banks are going to use XRP by the end of 2019, because he didn't foresee how hard it would actually be to get those banks to use it. So the MoneyGram news was actually really good news. But the problem is, people were expecting price to balloon because they thought MoneyGram was going to somehow pour tens of billions or trillions of dollars a day of volume and shoot XRP up. But if they actually looked at the numbers, they know that's not possible. Western Union itself only does about $90 billion a year in transfers, and MoneyGram's only a small fraction of that, because Western Union's a lot bigger than MoneyGram. So that type of traffic or that type of volume was never going to be able to push XRP up in price. And the corridors that are going to be developed for MoneyGram, the XRP corridors, are going to take time to develop and take time to integrate. And plus, MoneyGram as a company has kind of been in the shitter for like the last 10 years. So there needs to be a long turnaround time, but people weren't expecting that because of all the hopium that was built up. The same thing for SBI. People thought, blink of an eye, like I said, and there was really no volume when SBI opened. If you look at SBI volume right now, it's pretty small. And yes, I know it takes a while for them to verify accounts, but they've been allowing people to sign up accounts since like 2017. So that's really not that much of an excuse. Eventually, they might have some volume and they might provide a decent amount of liquidity. I'd be surprised their volume was much more than Coinbase, honestly, based on the number of customers they have and the percentage of them that are actually going to be interested in SBI. But once again, you set your expectations way up here, and the reality is down here. Now, it's better than zero, but it's definitely not up here. And when reality doesn't meet these sky-high expectations, it's really bad for the coin. And this has happened over and over and over again. Never once has reality met unrealistic expectations, and yet the people who hype this stuff keep on setting unrealistic expectations. So because you have such unrealistic expectations, no one cares about the real news because the real news seems really tame compared to your expectations. So it works the same way in crypto as in stocks. If you set unrealistic expectations and you fail them, even if the news is actually good, people are not going to be willing to speculate or FOMO on it. Because, people were expecting tens of billions of dollars worth of volume from, Moneygram or SBI, and it didn't hit. And they're like, well, why would I FOMO in on these events when it didn't really hit the expectations? Well, it would have hit the expectations if they weren't so crazy stupid. So that's the reason XRP does not actually, I think part of the reason at least, that XRP doesn't react to good news is because people sell like this IMF, BIS, whatever, Fed, like XRP is going to be used at IMF, BIS, Federal Reserve or whatever. And, they've been selling this for the past year and a half, and there's really no signs of any of this happening. And when there's an actual smaller bank or a smaller remittance company like MoneyGram that actually comes on, it's not nearly as good as the IMF, BIS, or, the Fed or whatever. And, even the rumors for MoneyGram took it way above where it actually was. So unmet expectations means no pump for the coin. And people are disappointed in the price action of the coin because it doesn't pump, because of the inflated expectations that are never met. So let me know what you think in the comments. But that's why hype and hopium is really, really bad for XRP. And the price would actually just do a lot better if people actually had realistic expectations for XRP. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you and have a nice day.